Have you ever finished a study session feeling productive, then a few days later realized you barely remember any of it? That feeling is brutal. You spend hours studying, watching videos, taking notes, and somehow your brain acts like none of it happened. So you start wondering, am I just bad at learning? Most students think the problem is motivation or discipline or intelligence. But what if the real problem is something much simpler? What if you're learning in the wrong order? Because here's something nobody tells you. Learning faster isn't about working harder. It's about following the right sequence. And once you understand this, studying starts feeling a lot less frustrating. Today, I'll show you a simple 3-step method that helps information actually stick. Not because it's a secret trick, but because it's how your brain naturally learns. The 3 steps are understand, memorize, and apply. Most people skip at least one of them, and that's exactly why they keep forgetting what they study. Let's start with the first step, understand. This is where most students accidentally sabotage themselves. Think about the last time you learned something difficult. Maybe it was math, coding, science, history. What did you do? You probably searched for more information, another video, another explanation, another article, another set of notes. But here's the weird part. Learning isn't collecting information, it's connecting information. Most people don't need more explanations. They need one explanation that finally clicks. And when that click never happens, everything becomes harder because your brain is constantly asking one question. Do I actually get this? If the answer is no, memorizing feels exhausting. You reread the same page again and again, and somehow you're still confused. Sound familiar? That's not because you're lazy. It's because your brain doesn't like storing information it doesn't understand. So before you try to memorize anything, ask yourself, could I explain this to a friend? Not with fancy words, not like a textbook, just simply. Imagine explaining it to someone who's completely new to it, or honestly,
to yourself at 11 p.m. when your brain is barely functioning. If you can explain it simply, you probably understand it. And if you can't, don't panic. Most students immediately assume they're bad at learning, but usually they just need a better explanation. That's a huge difference. Now, let's move to step 2, memorize. This is where most people waste the most time because memorizing doesn't happen when information goes into your eyes. It happens when information comes out of your brain. Think about that for a second. Most students spend hours rereading, highlighting, reviewing notes, watching the same lesson again. It feels productive, but feeling productive and learning aren't always the same thing. Here's a quick example. Imagine you're studying biology. Instead of rereading the chapter for the 5th time, close the book. Then ask, what do I actually remember? At first, it feels awful. Your brain suddenly goes blank. You remember less than you expected. And most students interpret that as failure, but it's actually the opposite. That struggle is the learning, because every time you force your brain to retrieve information, you're strengthening the memory.
This is why students who constantly test themselves often remember more than students who constantly reread, even when they study less. And honestly, this part is uncomfortable. Nobody likes realizing they've forgotten something. But that tiny moment of discomfort is usually where real learning begins. And here's another mistake students make. They try to do everything in one massive study session. 4 hours, 5 hours, maybe more. Then they wonder why nothing sticks. But your brain learns better through repeated exposure. A focused 20-minute review today can beat hours of last-minute cramming. That's not laziness, that's strategy. Now let's talk about the 3rd step. The step almost everyone ignores, apply. This is where information finally becomes useful, because understanding something isn't the same as being able to use it. You can watch productivity videos every day, but until you actually plan your week, nothing changes. You can understand coding concepts perfectly, but until you build something yourself, it won't fully stick. And here's the part people hate hearing. You're supposed to make mistakes. Seriously, mistakes aren't proof you're failing.
They're proof you're practicing. You try, you mess up, you notice what you don't know. You fix it, then you try again. That's the cycle that creates improvement. Most students want learning to feel smooth, but real learning is usually messy. Think about learning to ride a bike. Nobody reads one article and instantly becomes good at it. You wobble, you lose balance, you adjust, and eventually it becomes natural. Learning works the same way. And this leads to a realization that completely changed how I think about studying. Most people think learning looks like this: learn once, remember forever. But that's not how it works. Real learning looks more like this: understand, remember, use, repeat, again and again and again until it becomes automatic. That's why mastery never looks dramatic. It looks ordinary. Reviewing what you forgot, practicing when you're not confident, showing up even when you don't feel smart. The students who learn quickly usually aren't geniuses. They just follow a system. They understand first, memorize second, apply third, and over time, something interesting happens. Information sticks faster. You trust yourself more. You stop panicking every time you forget something, and studying feels less overwhelming. Not easy, just clear. So if you've been struggling lately, maybe stop asking, how do I learn faster? And start asking, am I learning in the right order? Because one missing step can make hours of studying feel useless. So today, pick just one thing you're learning, a chapter, a skill, a topic, and run it through these 3 steps. Understand, memorize, apply. Nothing fancy, just the right order. Because sometimes the biggest improvement doesn't come from working harder. It comes from making one small shift. And in the next video, we're talking about why smart students forget less, even when they study less. That one might completely change how you review information.